All right, so get this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What if I told you that the tariffs Trump just threatened could actually end up helping China
Yeah.
in the long run?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking a huge power shift globally. We're diving into that today. We've got reports from the New York Times, CNBC, the South China Morning Post,
Wow.
even some Italian sources like NSA and Il Post.
It was pretty wild, right? The idea that these tariffs could actually end up making China stronger. It all comes back to how China's been like quietly repositioning itself in the world economy for years.
Okay, so let's back up a sec for anyone who, like, missed it. Trump just announced that he wants to put a 25% tariff on all goods from Mexico and Canada,
Oof.
and for China, an extra 10% on top of the tariffs that are already there.
Wow.
And he's saying it's about, fentanyl,
Uh-huh.
immigration, and basically those countries need to play by his rules. But,
I mean, is that really the whole story?
I mean, is that the whole story? What do you think?
Well, if you look at, like, the history of tariffs, right?
Yeah.
They've been used a lot to force concessions from other countries. Sometimes it works.
Right.
Sometimes it backfires big time. And then you get those trade wars everyone's always talking about, like back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
The Smoot-Hawley Act in the U.S. Most people think that actually made the Great Depression way worse.
Oh, wow.
Because other countries retaliated with their own tariffs, and it just spiraled.
So Trump is basically playing a high-stakes game here.
Totally.
And the whole world is watching.
Exactly. And the reactions from China, Mexico, and Canada have been, like, really interesting. China's been warning about a potential trade war.
Right.
Really emphasizing how connected the U.S. and Chinese economies are. It's almost like they're saying, look, you can hurt us, but you'll hurt yourselves too.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
Nobody wins a trade war.
Right.
The thing I find interesting is that Canada seems to be taking a different approach.
Oh.
They're really playing up their role as this key energy supplier to the U.S., almost like a subtle reminder, like, hey, remember how much you need us.
It's a smart move, I think. They're highlighting their value, emphasizing their commitment to border security, all without even mentioning retaliation.
Right.
Mexico's been pretty quiet so far, though.
They have, but I mean, they've downplayed these worries about Trump's, protectionist policies before.
Yeah.
They've emphasized that U.S.-Mexico relationship,
Yeah.
like how strong it is. Okay, so let's say Trump actually does it. Like, he actually goes through with these tariffs. What could that mean for, like, everyday people?
Well, economists are already warning about, like, a big spike in inflation.
Oh, wow.
I mean, imagine everything getting more expensive. Cars, avocados, everything.
Right.
American consumers are going to feel it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just consumers either.
Right.
American businesses that rely on imports from these countries, they're going to be in a really tough spot.
Yeah, because their costs are suddenly going up.
Exactly.
And they either raise prices and risk losing customers,
Right.
or they eat those costs and their profits take a hit.
Exactly. And some companies might even decide to just move their production out of China entirely.
Oh, yeah.
Just to avoid the tariffs. Like, we saw that happen during Trump's first term.
Right.
Companies moving to places like Vietnam and Mexico.
To avoid those tariffs. It's ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because Trump wants to bring jobs back to the U.S., but these tariffs could actually push more jobs overseas.
It's like, I don't know, whack-a-mole or something. You solve one problem and another one pops up.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the U.S. side. But what about the countries he's targeting?
They're not going to just sit there and take it. Retaliatory tariffs are definitely a possibility. China could hit American soybeans. Mexico might target U.S. corn. Canada could hike up the prices on aluminum.
Right.
Everyone loses in that scenario.
Yeah.
And then there are the financial markets. I mean, the Mexican peso and the Canadian dollar, they already took a hit after Trump's announcement. Asian stock markets, especially in Hong Kong, they reacted negatively too.
So it sounds like this whole fentanyl thing is really driving a lot of this, like especially with China.
Yeah.
But haven't they already been working together to fight fentanyl trafficking?
That's the thing. There has been cooperation, even with all the tension between the U.S. and China.
Right.
Both sides know how serious the fentanyl crisis is. And they've been working together on things like, law enforcement and intelligence sharing.
So why the tariffs on top of that? Is he saying it's not enough?
That's a good question. It really makes you wonder what else he might be trying to get from China.
Like using this as leverage.
Could be.
Yeah.
To understand what those concessions might be, you got to look at what Trump's base cares about.
Right. Like, he campaigned on being tough on China, bringing back jobs, cracking down on immigration and drug trafficking.
Yeah.
It's all stuff his supporters really respond to.
Absolutely. So by going after China on fentanyl, he's playing to his base and maybe using it to force China's hand on other stuff.
Like trade deals, maybe?
Could do.
It feels like there's a lot more going on here than just economics.
Yeah, for sure. There's all this political maneuvering, diplomatic stuff, domestic concerns. It's all tied up with these tariffs.
Right.
And it's all happening against the backdrop of this already shaky global economy.
It's a lot. And then you can't forget about the fentanyl itself.
Yeah.
It's not like there's an easy answer here.
Yep.
I mean, the stuff starts in China, gets processed by cartels in Mexico, and then it's smuggled into the U.S. It's like a huge mess.
It shows how interconnected all these issues are.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if tariffs are really the right way to deal with something as complicated as this.
Right. Like, what if China does crack down harder?
Uh-huh.
Does that actually stop the fentanyl from getting into the U.S.?
Good point.
Or do the cartels just, find another way?
Right. It's a good question.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Like, is Trump going to follow through? Or is there, some wiggle room to negotiate?
Well, you have to remember, Trump has a history of using tariffs as a negotiating tactic. This could all just be to get everyone to the table to try to get what he wants.
But he's also shown he's willing to follow through, even if it means messing up global trade.
He has, and that's what makes this so unpredictable. He's under pressure at home to do something about inflation and high prices.
Right.
And, tariffs could actually make those problems worse.
So he's in a tough spot, trying to look strong, but also trying to avoid, an economic disaster.
Yeah.
Didn't he pick a new Treasury Secretary, though?
He did?
What's he saying about all this?
His nominee, Scott Bessent, has said that he sees tariffs mostly as a negotiating tool.
So maybe there's a chance he backs down?
Maybe. But we'll have to wait and see if he's serious or if it's just talk.
Right. We're still early in this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, this is just the beginning.
Feels like the stakes are incredibly high, though.
They are.
We're talking about, potential economic damage, a trade war, the whole fentanyl crisis.
Yeah.
It's all kind of tangled up together in a way that could, reshape the whole world.
It really could.
And then there's this whole other layer we haven't even gotten to yet.
Oh, yeah.
About how these tariffs could actually end up benefiting China in the long run.
Right.
That's a whole other thing.
Exactly. It might sound kind of crazy, but these tariffs could actually help China's strategy.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They've been trying to rely less on the U.S. market for years.
So you're saying these tariffs could make China stronger? How does that even work?
Well, think about it this way. For years, Chinese exporters have been looking beyond the U.S.
Oh, okay.
Building up trade with Southeast Asia, Africa, South America.
The global South.
Yeah, exactly. Those economies are growing so fast.
Yeah, right.
It's like a huge market they can tap into.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Right. They learned from those past trade disputes with the U.S.
Makes sense.
Diversifying is key, and these new tariffs, well, if they happen, it could speed that shift. If selling to the U.S. gets more expensive, you'd look for other buyers, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So China adapts, finds new markets, and maybe comes out ahead.
Possibly, yeah.
But what about U.S. businesses? What happens to them?
American companies that depend on those Chinese imports,
Yeah.
they're the ones stuck in the middle. They've got some tough choices.
Like what?
Well, if they raise prices to cover the tariffs, they might lose customers to companies that don't.
Right.
But if they don't raise prices, their profits take a hit.
So no matter what they do, it's not good.
Not really, no.
Are there any other ways this could affect U.S. businesses?
Well, some companies might just decide to move their production out of China entirely.
Oh, wow.
Like we were saying before, we saw that happen during Trump's first term.
Yeah, to get around the tariffs.
Right, to places like Vietnam and Mexico.
It's crazy how Trump wants to bring those jobs back.
I know.
And the tariffs could actually push even more jobs away.
It's like you said, whack-a-mole.
Totally. Okay, so global trade is a mess, basically.
It is incredibly complex, yeah, and all these ripples, they can go way beyond just economics.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
If they get into a trade war, that could hurt their relationship in other areas.
Oh, right.
And make it harder to work together on other stuff like climate change.
Or even things like nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
So these tariffs aren't just about economics.
Not at all. They could impact global stability, too.
That's a bit scary, honestly.
It's a valid concern, for sure. It makes you wonder if they're really worth the risk.
Right, and all those unintended consequences.
It's a lot to think about.
You mentioned those long-term impacts on supply chains earlier. What did you mean by that?
Well, right now we have this really globalized economy. Companies get parts and materials from all over the world to keep costs down.
Right.
But imagine if these tariffs make that too expensive
Right.
or too risky.
What happens then?
Well, companies would probably start looking closer to home for suppliers.
Oh, I see.
Exactly. And that could lead to these regional trading blocks.
Regional trading blocks.
Yeah, where countries do more business with their neighbors.
Instead of having one big global market.
Right. We could end up with smaller, more localized economies.
Wow, that's a huge change.
It would impact everything.
Prices, how countries relate to each other.
It's kind of unsettling to think about, isn't it?
It is, but also kind of fascinating. What do you think is the most significant potential consequence?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know there are a lot.
There are, but that shift in global supply chains, that's definitely up there. It could really change how businesses operate.
And how countries work together.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that it's a complex world out there.
It is.
No easy answers when it comes to trade, economics, or even, like, geopolitics.
Nope, not at all. And this situation with the tariffs is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to think critically.
For sure.
And consider all the possible outcomes.
Right, both the good and the bad.
Okay, so let's go back to that idea that these tariffs could actually be good for China. Could that really happen?
It's definitely possible.
Really?
Remember, they've been trying to rely less on the U.S. for a while.
Yeah.
These tariffs could speed that up, make them more independent.
And less vulnerable to the U.S.
Exactly.
Could that shift the balance of power, like towards China?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and it's kind of scary.
We'll have to see how it all plays out.
It makes you think, what if the biggest risk isn't economic damage or a trade war?
What if it's something bigger?
Yeah, what if it's a shift in global power and the U.S. gets left behind?
Something to think about, that's for sure.
It definitely is. It really highlights how important strategy is when it comes to global trade.
Absolutely. And geopolitics, too. This is a whole new era.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, you know.
It is. The idea that, like, trying to protect America could actually help China become more powerful.
Right. It's kind of wild.
It is. It shows you those good intentions don't always mean good outcomes.
Especially with something as messy as global trade and geopolitics.
Exactly. It's not a simple equation.
So, like, what can we do? It feels so big, you know.
Well, just knowing about these things, that's a good first step.
Being aware of the consequences.
Right, like knowledge is power, right.
Yeah, I guess so.
Pay attention to how companies are reacting, what governments are doing, how the markets are responding.
Okay, so stay informed.
Yeah, keep your ears open. What else can we do? Let me think.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to, like, question what you're hearing.
Oh, okay.
Think critically about the information. There's so much out there.
It's easy to get caught up in it all.
It is. So don't just take things at face value.
Right, right. Do your own research.
Exactly. Dig a little deeper. Question the stories you're being told.
And form your own opinions.
Yes, exactly. And be ready for things to change.
What do you mean?
This whole situation, it's fluid, unpredictable, you know. There will be surprises. Things will happen that we don't expect.
Sounds like we're in for a wild ride.
Probably. But if you stay informed, if you stay engaged, you can make sense of it all.
Navigate this crazy world, yeah.
Exactly.
It's a lot. We covered so much today.
You did.
Trump's announcement, what could happen, how it affects industries.
The fentanyl crisis, those unintended consequences.
And whether these tariffs could actually backfire and help China.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But that's what we do here.
Yeah, we explore these complex issues, connect the dots, try to figure it all out.
And we hope you'll do the same.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, stay curious.
Because the more you understand how the world works,
the better you'll be able to handle whatever comes next.
So, as we wrap things up here,
yeah,
we'll leave you with this thought.
Okay.
What if the scariest part of these tariffs isn't just the economic damage?
Or a trade war.
Yeah. What if it's a change in who has the power?
A shift in the balance.
And the U.S. is left behind.
Something to think about, right?
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
As always, stay tuned.